A warm welcome to everyone joining us on our sixth episode of Embodied Masculinity, where we explore the fundamental elements around what it means to be a man in the 21st century. Today, we have the beautiful pleasure of having David with us, David Chambers, and sharing the space with us. David is a dating and intimacy coach, coaching men for over a decade. He guides them to create authentic attraction, build deep emotional connections, embody healthy masculinity, and experience connected sexual intimacy. The essence of his work is around helping men to build self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and self-leadership. I've known David for, it's about over a year now, getting there. And we shared the space on your amazing podcast, the Authentic Man podcast, and we spoke about authentic seduction, of which, dude, I think we can speak for hours and hours about.
Definitely.
So today's topic being around building authentic and healing relationships. Honestly, I couldn't have thought of anyone better to join us today than you. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So one of the questions, just jumping right in there, I like to always get a bit of a background of how you actually came into this space. So if you could give us a bit of a background about you and how you embarked on this journey.
I guess it started for me with having lots of inauthentic and very dysfunctional relationships, to be honest. Like I started off in a place probably 10, 15 years ago where my relationships were somewhat chaotic, somewhat difficult, stressful. I wasn't communicating. I wasn't listening. Relationships. There was a point in that time, probably about 10 years ago, where I remember saying to a friend of mine one day, I said, I'm done with relationships. I'm done. I'm not getting any more relationships. It's not for me. It doesn't work for me. And he kind of like nodded and said, okay, cool. And from there, my opinion started to shift. I got into a relationship which was very healing in so many ways. It was very accepting. I was maybe for one of the first times in my life, I was allowed to be me mostly, and was accepted for that. And then I think that relationship came to an end probably about 5 years ago now. And out of that, there was a pain. It was like, I don't want another relationship to end like this, with me not communicating, with me not speaking up, not asking for what I need, but also shutting down and closing out my partner at the time. So I just said, I don't want it. I really remember one day I always say this, we'd just broken up. I was sitting in Bolivia in a town called Sucre, and I was in a hotel and I was crying, and I was like, I'm not going to let this happen again. I'm not going to let this happen again. And I kind of just really embarked on just a journey of connection. I just was really committed to connecting with people whenever I met them, whether it's day to day or as I was traveling, to actually connect with them, to actually share myself with them. You know, I used to answer the question when people would say to me, how are you feeling? Oh, hey, Dave, saw you last night. How are you feeling this morning? And I would answer the question really honestly. I'd be like, oh, I'm not feeling that good today. I'm feeling a bit sad, feeling a bit lonely. And I don't know why. And I would say that to people sometimes, and they would look at me shocked, because everyone was just used to everyone saying, yeah, they're fine. And it kind of continued from my travels to coming back home, back to London and living in London, and just really diving into what it was to be authentic, what it was to be vulnerable, like the healing, looking at my relationships, my past relationships, and being really honest with myself and being like, where am I responsible? And I generally believe that if we take 100% responsibility, we can start to really move through things a lot better. When we hand over lots of responsibility to the other person in relationship and say, oh, it was all their fault, or they're responsible for stuff, it doesn't really allow us to look at the fine details of how we were being, how we acted. So my journey, like so many people's journeys, come from my own pain, my own difficulty. And hence why I know what is possible when we really commit ourselves to opening up, stepping into who we are, and allowing the world to see us as we are.
That's amazing. It's really, really beautiful. And, as you're talking, I'm thinking about this word authenticity. So when men come to you and they present themselves in whatever frame they're in, how do you work through that with them to reach that point of really bringing out that more authentic side of them?
And men come in very different parts of the journey. For some men, it's like there's big rocks they've got to move. There's big giant rocks they need to move, you know, like they're not being honest with the people they date from the off, like maybe about who they are, what they desire, what they want. And then for other men, it's like what I call kind of grains of sand. It's the tiny little things that they're not always aware of, that are not being authentic about. You know, maybe they don't realize that they're not sharing vulnerably and honestly, or maybe when there is something that's troubling them inside a relationship or a budding relationship, instead of asking a question from a place of compassion and wanting to understand, they just go, "Oh, I don't answer that. I won't ask that question. It's fine. It's fine. It will blow over. It'll be no problem." And it's those little times in which we're inauthentic, which they build up inside us, you know, inside a relationship as we're building. So it's learning to kind of feel those moments and go, "Oh, actually, there's a moment here where I get to really ask a question that shows vulnerability, or there's a moment I get to share openly about who I am, my past, my experience, or what I desire."
Mm.
And it's just allowing them and working with them through just coaching through questions and going, what other option would there was for you in that moment to say something? What else would you have liked to said? What did you not say? What were you avoiding saying? And through this kind of introspection and this questioning, we start to see where we are hiding ourselves, where we're not being truly authentic for who we are. And it gives us the opportunity in the future to go, "Oh, I'm in one of these moments right now. Oh, we talked about, you know, sometimes guys come back to me and they're like, "Oh, David, she asked me a question and I felt my nervous system wanting to shut down. I felt myself feeling anxious and nervous, and I breathed and I said to her, give me one moment, let me have a think." And then they answer the question and they're like, "I couldn't have done that 6 months ago." And I'm like, that is the work in action, you know, that is where we're trying to get to. And you always have these opportunities to do that. So, you know, it's men, when men are brave and they want to do that work, then it's beautiful work to do.
And I feel it's really beautiful how you put together like bravery. Because last week we were speaking, and there was a lot about, you know, bravery being kind of like the strength and the kind of like shutting emotions away. And you're right now just using it in context of bravery is actually really openly showing like, look, this is what's going on for me right now. And it's this amazing reframe of, yeah, actually bravery being the openness rather than the armored upness.
It's I was listening to Brené Brown recently, the first TED talk she did. You know, I must have listened to this TED talk like 5, 6, 7 times, and it popped up in my YouTube feed, and I was like, I'll have to listen to this I was, you know, making some tea in the morning. So, and she really talked about the word courageous, you know, and I think if I remember rightly from the talk, it's like the word courageous is kind of original meaning is like the willingness to show one's heart and one's self, you know, the courage to do that. And it's like, that's really courageous, you know, it's really courageous to go into a space and be like, this is who I am, kind of putting yourself in this vulnerable position where people could ridicule you, point at you, tell you you're stupid, you know, whatever it could be. And it's so courageous to do that. But we've been so conditioned to believe that courage is like grinning and bearing or hiding away or defending. You know, we've and those things can be very courageous in different aspects, but it's like the one way of being courageous, which we kind of most people aren't even aware of, is to like show up and like you said, to open, to be there, to stand and go, this is me, this is what I'm about, this is who I am, this is what I desire, this is what I love to do. And then stand there and be like proud of what you've done and be, you know, there takes so much courage in doing that.
Well,
the other word that where you go.
No, go to, yeah.
Because I just wanted to pick up on a thing, because I've really, the word like integrity is a word that's just been really like very prominent for me over the last few weeks, and I'm just curious to hear if you have like views on kind of like authenticity and integrity, like how they relate and where they're maybe different, where they're the same.
Yeah, I think they're both words. They're both, how different are they? They just feel like you're always unfolding, aren't you, with them? Because, you know, in one maybe now I sit here and go, yes, I'm being authentic. And I look back a year ago and I was like, I was being authentic then. But maybe I look back now from where I stand now and go, no, there were times when I wasn't being completely authentic. So it's kind of like I see that as like an onion skin that we kind of are always unfolding, unrolling, is like new layers of authenticity, because there's often we think we are being authentic, we think we're being true to ourselves, and then when we kind of look and go, nope, I was just no, my mask was just coming on in a different way, in a different aspect. Whereas integrity to me always feels like truth, you know. Where am I being true? Where am I being honest? Where am I being in integrity with my own values as well, which is another kind of component of authenticity. Is like, do we even know we have values? You know, that's also a big part. It's like learning values. I imagine the two of you know this is like, you know, when you do this work, you start having to build and go, what are my values? And am I living in integrity with them? And oh, wait a minute, what is this value here right now? Am I integrity with this value, or am I integrity with this other value? Is there any conflict in integrity, or do I need to update my value or update what is kind of integral to me?
I mean, I relate a lot with what Toby said before, but it's been an interesting word that I'm very deeply connected with now, and it's very prominent in my mind. And I think, you know, kind of feeding back into that idea of courageousness, a reference point that I always use is David Hawkins' Scales of Consciousness. And you know, before, as I was sort of really stepping into my masculinity, I never felt that I had a choice to be courageous. And in terms of just on the level of just resonance and vibrational frequency, it's such a powerful place that we can get to quite quickly. And it only takes 30 seconds to get there. And I'm sure I've said the catchphrase before, 30 seconds of courage. And, you know, when you do take yourself into that space, then you are definitely far more available to be integrous to yourself and authentic to yourself.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful way to put it. You know, when we have that courage, we have those moments where just like, yes, I can do this. I can do this, you know? I think that's almost the message we have to tell ourselves a bit more often, isn't it? It's like we have a thought to do something, to say something, to step forward in who we are. And it's like the first thought we often have after that is, no, I shouldn't do that. No. We get all the reasons why we shouldn't. And it's almost like we need to start to train ourselves to go, no, I can do that. Yes, I can. And have that courage to do that.
You present such a beautiful self-awareness about yourself, and you know, I know you and Asa, and it's a power couple. Look, if there's a power couple, Toby's also in a super power couple. But the way that you kind of sort of bounce off of each other and sort of bring that self-awareness out is beautiful to see you both together. How did you get to that space of being just that little bit extra self-aware?
I think a lot of it has been to sit with myself a lot, you know, whether that's meditation, whether that's breath work, and sometimes that's with other people actually who are willing to have difficult conversations with you. You know, I've been lucky to have some great coaches and mentors who are very straight people, you know. There's a woman who I would call one of my spiritual teachers, and she will talk to you in such a straight way, such a straight manner, you know. She won't sugarcoat things. And why that's so amazing is because they're able to point out to you the gaps in your self-awareness to allow them to be brought into your self-awareness. You're like, yeah, I do that thing. Yeah, I really do that thing. Cool. But then you also have to be accepting that you're going to learn something new, and it might be quite difficult to take on, or, you know. So I think slowing down, being willing to stop, willing to see where you've done something where you're out of alignment, out of integrity, out of authenticity of yourself, and go, oh yeah, I did that. So it takes the willingness to go, I'm going to be wrong a lot. You know, I'm going to be wrong a lot. And I think for me also, it's been observing myself. Sometimes as I'm talking to you, I'm kind of sitting here and I'm like, oh my God, this human being that is me is on this computer thing with these two other wonderful men. And people might be thinking of me as someone who knows stuff, you know, and I have to kind of observe myself. Am I acting? Am I being that person, or am I just coming from the place of what I am? And almost in real time sometimes is I'm listening to myself as I speak, and I'm like, is this truly what I'm feeling in this moment? And it's learning to feel the moments as well, to be, you know, more in tune with yourself, but also to be really open. You know, it's a strange one. It's like to be open to what comes and leaves, comes through my mind, comes through me, gets transmitted through me, and comes out my mouth, and trusting that as well. So, you know, some practices I always recommend to people, men, women, is that meditation. You know, go and do a big meditation retreat. Go and do it. You're scared. If you want to, like, you know, I did Vipassana a few years ago, and that was mind-blowing, you know, to do that, to be in that level of just being with self so much is incredible. So I think, you know, things like that, having someone in your life that will reflect you, you know, like, even, you know, I'm really honest, like in the last week, I've been really grumpy, been really miserable. I've been really like grumpy towards Orsa as well. And I did some breath work the other morning on Saturday morning, and I really saw that there was nothing that she was doing. This was just me, unfortunately, being grumpy with myself about some things that were in my control, but I didn't really want to accept that were in my control. And in that moment, I had the awareness as like, oh, this is me. I'm doing this. And I even said to myself, I was like, but I don't have to stop being grumpy. I don't have to judge myself or be annoyed. I can just sit with this until it dissipates. And at some point yesterday evening, we ran a workshop, and just in doing some of the exercises that we were teaching in the workshop, it dissolved this layer of grumpiness away from me. And it's almost as we finished the workshop, I felt myself grabbing back to that grumpiness. And I was like, why am I doing that? Is this somewhere? And then I was like, she was watching something on TV, and I was finishing up an Instagram post. And as I was sitting there, I was like, there's some part of me that wants to hold on to this because it keeps disconnection. And in disconnection, I feel safe. And I don't feel like I might lose myself, my desire, my will. And all of this is occurring as I'm, you know, living my daily life here. And to do this is like being willing to look at my behavior and look at what she reflects back to me and what I see as her making me do, and going, why am I doing this? What am I trying to achieve with this sort of behavior? And it's just being willing to ask those sorts of questions. And when we have the space, because I think it's important to have space to do that as well, whether that's in our relationship or just outside of our work and our busy lives, then we allow ourselves for our awareness to grow, because we're constantly shining a light on ourselves, our behavior, our thinking, and also our emotions.
Yeah, I mean, it truly resonates. This whole piece of like holding on to a thing to like continue that level of disconnection, because disconnection is what always felt safe. And I actually caught myself in these behavioral patterns in the last few days as well, which is really beautiful that you're now like highlighting this, where it's like, man, like what would I lose if I let go of it, you know, or what would I gain? And I feel that that component of potentially ego death or loss of self, or it's really weird. It's sort of like this fear component that and it kind of like once I step into it, you know, that often then resolves into something healing, where suddenly something becomes integrated, and it's like, wow, actually I have not vanished, despite allowing a deeper layer of connectedness. And that connects with what Fast was saying in the chat, of like saying how you feel. Where what I'm noticing, and I spoke with a friend of mine yesterday about this, is it's ultimately about our physiology, where in one instance of my life, like my mind wishes the person like the absolute best, but I know myself want to like annihilate this person. You know, it's like, man, I wish them to have the most miserable experience, and it's really weird, you know. And so I'm doing this Buddhist practice of looking to what am I gaining from wishing basically that this person has a like miserable experience, you know, like what am I kind of like holding on to? But how would my life shift if I'm in my whole being actually wish well? And so I did a Vipassana retreat a few years ago, and dude, I had this experience of suddenly like this like weird. First of all, it was like almost like this pillar of concrete, kind of like unfolding my chest and then being lifted off. And so I mean, when you say it, you know, meditation or breath work, it's so important for me, especially when I do breath work. I feel like I actually create the space on my inside to then show up in my partnership again and be like, yeah, actually everything is good. I love you, rather than feel like you fucking piss me off. You know, I feel I have no space to like, and it's so interesting. It's like 10 minutes of conscious breathing to just like totally shift the state. So dude, I'd love to hear more on what are your like specific routines in that space to actually create that feeling of space so that you know are able to invite your partner or humans in your world into your life again.
Yeah, so my morning is, I look to my left because it's my morning routine's on my wall now, because I'm trying to, it's over Christmas, it always kind of gets a bit over the place. So in the morning I do some like reading. What am I reading at the moment? I'm usually reading a few books, so I just like cycle through them. And breath work for 10 minutes, 10 to 20 minutes of breath work in the morning, depending on what I'm feeling. Meditation between kind of 10 and 20 minutes as well. And movement. I find movement's quite good. So it could be anything from shaking. Maybe I'll just shake for 5 minutes. Or I studied Tantra for quite a long time, and Tantric yoga. So maybe I'll do some of my Tantric yoga positions as well, especially if I'm feeling, especially if my heart feels closed. There's like a few positions I'll do there. And it's just that imagining the energy coming into the heart. And like you said, you feel that it, you know, your chest starts to open up a little bit as well. And in terms of breath work, I probably go for maybe 2 different styles. You know, Wim Hof is always a good one to go to. And I've also been recently doing quite a bit of heart coherence breathing, which is like a 5.5 seconds in, 5.5 seconds out. And it's just a nose breathing. And really, when you do that for 10 minutes, like afterwards, you feel so light, you feel so connected to your body. And I'll even adjust if I'm doing Wim Hof breathing. Sometimes as I'm breathing out, if I feel that my chest is a bit closed, or I'm close to my partner, I'll imagine the breath coming out of my chest as well. You know, really just coming out of my chest. And I really find that makes such a difference. Or if I'm feeling blocked sexually, then I imagine it coming out my perineum as well. Like, so I just really move with what's kind of alive in me at the time, and what I feel like my body needs.
Super interesting. Super interesting. I would be very, very curious to sort of put all of our routines on a piece of paper and go, well, you know, let's do a full analysis of really what works for everyone here. Because I made a promise to myself. It's already, I think, going on 2 weeks now, that I would be doing an hour of meditation every single morning. So getting up at 6, and I hate waking up early. And what's really fascinating is that I do an hour meditation and an hour session of yoga after. And just being able to sort of sit and surrender in that chaos, especially from the night before. I think a lot of people fail to forget that, you know, your last 45 minutes going into your sleep cycle is really what you're going to be dreaming of throughout the night. And that kind of always stays in my head. So it's like, I know that the first sort of couple of minutes is just going to be absolute chaos. But that surrendering process has become immensely healing. And, you know, that is a good start for the day. I think is a good practice for anybody. Just adopting, even like the way you're describing it, sort of 20-20-20, right? 20 minutes breathing, 20 minutes movement, 20 minutes meditation. It's spectacular. But how many of the men do you find are very resistant to that kind of suggestion?
Oh, massively. There's a guy, and I'm not really working with this guy. He's my intern actually at the moment. And I was saying to him, because he helps me with editing all my podcasts, and I said, somehow meditation came up, and I said, have you tried meditation? He was like, no, I've never tried. I said, you've probably noticed I mention it a lot. He goes, yeah, you mention it almost every single podcast. You mention meditation. I said, okay, cool. So we were talking about what bits and pieces he was going to do for me that week. And I said, okay, cool. There's one other action I want you to do. I want you to meditate. He was like, what? I said, I want you to meditate. I said, I can suggest some apps if you want, like, whatever. I was like, but that's one of the tasks. As long as we've, delivering me the edited podcast, I want you to meditate. And he was like, oh, I'm not sure, and he's a young black kid from the States, and said, it's one of those things that kind of always taught, black people don't do that. I was like, no, I was told the same message, black people don't meditate. That's not for us, blah, blah, blah. I was like, but most of those things we've told that black people shouldn't do is rubbish. So go and do it. So he came back the next week and I said, oh, how was it? I said, did you meditate? He goes, yeah, I did. And he said, oh, I did 10 minutes every day for 5 days in a row. I said, how do you feel? He goes, I just went into my day feeling calmer. He goes, normally I'd be running around trying to do things in 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. He said, I just did what I had to do, and then I would rest and wait for the next thing. And I said, that is really what meditation can give you, especially, when you're doing the early bits, you're starting with like 10 minutes and it's just a breath meditation. And I said, what you can gain by going deeper and longer just becomes almost exponential, and it'll blow your mind, And he was like, yeah, but this is what I'm getting so now is so good. And I think the resistance that we have it's the same resistance that comes in with a lot of the coaching I do with people. It's like, I want you to slow down. I want you to do less. I want you to be more and do less. And the thing is that we think if we stop and we're in silence, we're afraid of what we will encounter. What will I encounter when I'm sitting with myself and no one else is saying anything to me, doing anything with me, and I'm just sitting here in the silence? What will I encounter? I will have to deal with my thoughts. And I think that is a big resistance. It's like, what? Oh, whoa, I don't know what that's going to be. The unknown of our own thoughts. But because many people have never meditated. They've never gone past that first few minutes of chaos, as you described it. Because it is the first few minutes is like, oh my God, I forgot this, I forgot that. Oh, am I sitting right? Am I uncomfortable? Am I breathing right? I can't quite feel the breath on my nose. All these things. But once you break through that, on the other side, it's like just stillness. It's just like a gentle stillness that you sit in. And maybe your mind will wander and come back, but there's a stillness on the other side of that. And most people have never experienced that stillness. So that stillness is an unknown to them. And they don't know that it's really beautiful and lovely to sit in. So all they know is the wall of thoughts, and they're like, I don't want to go there. I don't want to sit with that. So it can be really uncomfortable to have to sit and face your own thoughts and be with them.
That's really interesting. I mean, it's just kind of making me reflect when I was growing up. I don't think it was the resistance of the thoughts as such that I experienced. It was more the resistance of voicing them. So it's like, I guess this venture of mine, venturing into speaking with a lot more men and being in these kind of men's circles, it was always that, I think, the shame factor that would come through that, are these thoughts okay to actually voice? Whereas, I was living in a state of absolute silence with myself, and no one ever really knew past what I would give away if I was in a good place or not a good place. And it's like what you were saying in the beginning, and actually really saying how you're feeling. That's very powerful.
So for you, when your resistance was the shame and the what would come up and giving voice to them, what allowed you to kind of move past that?
I think it's part of that is what we were talking about before, about the authenticity and being integrous to myself. I think a lot of the shame in terms of thoughts are, or at least for me, are always about not hurting other people. I think that's the big thing for me. So it's kind of really being very aware that any action that I sort of implement in the world is going to have an impact. And then it's almost like this bit of a double bind that you go, well, I'd rather just sort of hold all this stuff inside rather than impacting anybody, because it's the shame of not only voicing what I'm experiencing or what I'm thinking and feeling, but how's it also impacting that person, and then carrying that burden, which of course highlights I've always been in the rescuer position in my life. But then doing that analysis and really unpacking that and going, well, you don't have to be that. You can really redefine how you want to be as a man. And I think a lot of men don't understand that they can actually change their narrative. really redefine their self-image and their sexual self-image, how they feel is more fitting and integrous to them.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point about the changing of self-image. And it's interesting you say about not wanting to hurt people, because this is something that comes up a lot with the men I work with.
Yeah.
Very worried about hurting anyone's feelings, and being, especially when we're talking about dating and relationships. And I understand this. I come from my mother's a helper, a rescuer, a looker after of people. She doesn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, and somewhat I've internalized a lot of that. And I wonder, like, how because I work with guys through this. It's often that we're willing to allow ourselves to be hurt or some harm to come to us if it means that other people don't have to be harmed.
Correct.
But also what that creates, that kind of, I don't want to hurt anyone, creates for us a lot is that we avoid having a conversation or doing a thing because we think that thing will hurt someone. And not doing that causes a lot more hurt to that person or to ourselves way down the line.
Yeah. It's speaking truth. I think it's an interesting position, because we always think that truth is based on timing, whereas truth, the moment you encounter it, really is the time that you need to give voice to it. And I think what I've noticed, not only for myself, but most of the men that I work with, when men go through the transition of being youngsters into more of a conscious phase, and especially in relation to our sexuality and being engaged with partners, we often get, I would probably say, villainized, if that is the right word, for the mistakes that we've made. And then it's almost that's deeply attached to that shame and guilt that we carry. And it's almost like, well, I've tried to sort of adjust and fix this past of mine to try and be this person that I really want to be in my self-image and my sexual self-image. But yet there's almost that statement of going, but you did that before. So we can't, it's and it's an interesting one, because I ask, well, how do we get rid of that? Is it down to the other person, or is it down to us to actually really forgive and accept who and what we've done and who we're becoming fundamentally?
And it's you talk about this, and it's why it feels so alive for me is I spend a lot of time on Instagram, posting and talking to people, and I come across a lot of accounts that really villainize men a lot. And I know that men have done wrong and men have done ill in the world, right? But it's like we're so quick to villainize men for their behavior. And I think it creates a lot of shame for the average man, because, I look at myself and my behavior maybe 10, 15 years ago. And I remember saying to my friend AJ, who I run the podcast with, I was like, a girl could come forward and say, David, he wasn't always this authentic and connected man. He seduced me one night and I think he might have lied to me and that sort of thing. And she'd be telling the truth, because I wasn't always the man I am today. And I did things in the past when I didn't have the knowledge that I have today. I look back and go, oh God, we look at, consent has been this thing that's kind of come through over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And I remember once sitting with a couple of friends, and we were sitting down and we were like, have you been reading? We were talking about Me Too, but have you been reading a lot of this stuff? We were like, yeah, we have been. And we sat and we looked at each other and we went, God, we didn't even think about this 8, 9 years ago. You just thought if a girl is talking to you and she said yes to come to your house, then, she must want to have sex with you. That was the assumption. And, we lived on things like, oh, she's saying no, she's playing hard to get. You talk to other women and they say, yeah, women play hard to get. And you kind of look back at your behavior now and you're like, oh God, I really hope I didn't traumatize anyone. I really wish I didn't hurt anybody. It was never my intention. And I think the thing we often have to do is we have to forgive ourselves, because if we don't, we just carry it forward and we hide it, and it becomes this really heavy shadow that we have to carry. Because we can say, I didn't know at the time, and I can now do my best to know with the knowledge I have. But it's like I can't know things in the past that I didn't know. And if I judge myself from where I am now into my past, I'm always going to look at myself and think, God, what a terrible human being I am. But I also need to be willing to put my hand up and go, I did things that might have been wrong. I did things that might have hurt people, and I didn't mean to. It was never my intention. I didn't deliberately going with the intention of ever hurting anyone. I was going in the intention of really, you know, creating beautiful moments and lovely times with people. And I think I acted pretty well, but there may be moments where I was completely unaware of the things I was doing. And I think through having that compassion for ourselves, it allows that kind of shame to be sanded down a little bit. It's kind of rendered inert, but it is something that as men, I think is really important for us to do, is to kind of look back and go, yeah, I might have done things that were not perfect.
Yeah, it's really interesting because Mario Martinez, he speaks a lot about that inclusive compassion, and not just, you know, compassion towards others, but really compassion to self, and that actually needing to really be a embodied practice where it's not enough to just basically talk yourself out of it, but really actually like feeling that energetic shift in a way. And I mean, the other piece that I would say to this as well is, man, you know, we're all co-creating things. Like no situation is like where you are solely like responsible. Like it's everything is like co-authored. And I mean, that's another big concept that Mario Martinez speaks about, is we enable things. You know, if the other person wouldn't act in certain ways, then certain parts of you wouldn't come out. And if you wouldn't act in certain ways, the other person wouldn't respond. And so it's like, man, you know, you can't really just blame one or the other, but it's ultimately go fucking look at yourself. You know, where have you been out of integrity? And then it's again, you know, like, are the actions, like my actions, are they coming from a place of wanting to establish connection? And how I establish connection today may be like way less conscious than like how I'm going to establish connection in like a month or 2 months from now. And the same is like looking back, you know, how I established connection 5 years ago. When I look back, it's like, man, that was like pretty elementary. But it's this thing where I think we gotta admit, man, we're all learning, we're all on this quest. And then yeah, also I think coming back to this like hard conversation, and it's like, look, yeah, both of us kind of fucked up, and yeah, having that difficult chat rather than sort of then, because I'm sometimes when I don't do it, you know, I feel really fucking resentful, and that just like just manipulates everything kind of going forward. And even, I mean, the thing that I'm noticing, you know, like when my body knows the truth but my mind wants to do something else, it's always like the body always wins, you know. When I feel I need space, my mind is like, no, let's go connect. Ultimately I go find a little argument, and then, you know, it creates that rupture where it's ultimately just if you need space, man, go have space, and trust that this hard conversation will actually lead to something that's more healing underneath in the end, where both of us have been able to be truthful.
But I think that's in part really what authenticity is that I don't think we'll ever reach that point of being purely 100% authentic, because in itself it's quite hurtful, because it's so deeply entrenched in truth. But I do think that it's super important being able to sit in that discomfort with somebody else and just take ownership of both sides of the coin. You're 100% correct, Toby.
Yeah, it's I think what I've learned in relationship is my capacity to have happy, connected, joyful relationships has increased as I've been more willing to have uncomfortable conversations and be able to sit with uncomfortable emotions that arise in me during a conversation with my partner. Like, the more I can be able to just be like, she's saying something to me and this makes me really bloody uncomfortable, and I can just stay and keep listening and be present to her, what she's feeling and what she's saying, without reacting, without exploding, and then answer or inquire, depending on the conversation, from a place of understanding and being connected to what she's feeling and her, and responding from that place. Like, the more connecting the conversation can have, no matter how difficult the conversation is. It's when I stray into reactivity and thinking just about me. So I'm hearing something. What does this mean about me? What does this mean about me? Oh, she's saying I'm like this? No way. She's saying I'm like that. And when my mind strays into that place, and you can feel it in your body. You could feel like you've lost it. You're no longer present to conversation. That is when, for me, when relationships become harder and harder and more difficult to be in, because it's simply, I'm no longer present to the relationship, the care, the love that's there and with me. And I'm in this place of really just thinking about this wounded part of me, this wounded little boy that wants to be right, that wants to get his own way, you know, and that's where the most chaos ensues in my relationships.
Something that I've had to learn is knowing that in that moment, exactly how you're describing it, it's super important for me to be able to take myself away and not be able to actually, or at least own not being able to give an answer right away. Because I've also learned that, giving that answer straight away and giving a reaction or giving something that the other person, of course, is desperate to receive isn't conscious enough for me. So I've had to kind of go, okay, look, I hear everything you're saying. I need to take myself away, sort of digest the stuff, really reflect on what a conscious answer is for you, and then come back and give that to you. So at least it's a heartfelt response rather than one that's a flippant one and just needing to fill a void in that particular space. And this is something I always tell my clients is that there's nothing that is compelling you to give an answer straight away. And that's something that really needs to be disarmed, I think, in a lot of us, because it's it's the same way that you're sort of describing that reactivity of explosion. The reactivity of giving an answer is exactly the same thing. It's not grounded enough.
We can take the space.
But it's something that Toby and I often discuss is the importance of tension within a relationship. And, before kind of growing into relationships, I grew up in a home that it was just tension all the time. And you see that's just navigated the worst possible way in the world. But now it's almost like the stance of welcoming that tension, having a different, there's something here, because this rupture is going to take us to the next phase of what our development is within the couple.
Yeah, I think when David, you spoke about your ability to just be with the discomfort or the hard conversation, yeah, it's been really interesting, because usually in the past I would have liked to just navigate and resolve it as quickly as possible. Well, now kind of the longer it stays, like the better the outcome. It's really weird. This is like almost like strange rebound. Like, like if you're able to stay longer and longer and longer, there's a like bigger jump in terms of like healing and deepening the connection. And so in the past I was afraid of like, oh man, this means that there will be no longer connection. It means that we're splitting up and blah blah blah. And now that I'm actually resolving to like, okay, if it ends, it's fine. And the moment I'm okay with like the tension, it disappears. It's this like weird thing. It's almost like as long as we're resisting to fully being present, it will continue and continue and continue and continue. And the moment it's like, okay, that's what it is.
That's such an important point, Toby, because I think of sort of arguments in general. So I know we're stereotyping here a little bit, but men will often get to the point of giving the answer, saying whatever is necessary to be heard, and with the hope that the chaos in that relationship is going to stop at that point so we can get back to normal. Whereas I've also had to sort of outcondition that response to go, okay, if something isn't resolved, we're going straight back into this tension again until we get to a state where both of us are completely surrendered to that, and then it slowly starts dissipating. So it's almost like, hi, my name is Massimo. Nice to meet you. When we have an argument, we're going to be arguing for the whole week until we resolve this. Rather than kind of just letting it just go, because otherwise it that's where I think that resentment really starts getting harbored within a relationship. Partner's not heard, not everything that she's kind of getting across to you is not received well, and then it's just like, well, okay, we're doing this again. It's the worst thing we could do.
Replaying. It's like because we don't want to be this. A lot of men don't want to be uncomfortable, and a lot of women as well, right? Yeah, I see this in women as well. They want to be uncomfortable. So it's like, what can I say and do to fix this right now? When actually the thing that needs to be said or done is that both people need to stay feeling uncomfortable so that they can voice the discomfort they're feeling, that they're not even sure. There might be layers of what they need to say that can only be accessed by staying in the uncomfortable, in the tension, as you put it, until they empty and they said all the things they want. And you might need to go through this cycle, as you said, in a week. You might need to go through it a couple of times of like, oh, I've had some new insight about why I'm actually feeling this way. And we voice it and we voice it. And then sometimes there is maybe one person just needs to let a lot go all in one go, and the other person just has to sit there and just, receive it like a tsunami sometimes, until that person is empty. And this is something that, again, I've really learned more and more about navigating, is when my partner, and also as she's like really letting a lot of emotion out, I just kind of sit there and just like receive it. I don't say anything. Sometimes I'll sit there in silence for 5, 10, 20 minutes. And there's usually a moment where she stops for like a few minutes, and I often sit and I think, she's not done yet. She's not done. There's more. And she'll keep going. And then there's usually a moment there when I'm like, there it is. It's all come out now. And usually the last thing that's said is something that feels along the lines of, I'm not feeling loved. I'm not feeling heard. I don't feel cared for. I'm not feeling you. And then you're like, this is the thing that was underneath all of the other things that was wanting to be said. And when we can talk to that thing there, then as you both said really well, you can kind of move the connection up to the next level, because it's like, I hear you, I understand, I feel that. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I've heard you say. This is the thing that I feel like is really important. Is that really important to you? Yes. Okay. And you don't even have to go into an action straight away. Sometimes it will naturally come into, and then sometimes there is actually nothing to do. There was just the thing needed to be said. It needed to be received, to be heard. And the connection is reestablished, but actually it can come back stronger.
Yeah, that's super important.
I feel it's beautiful, because we're now coming to this piece of like, when or how do relationships become healing? And what you just shared there, David, was this whole piece of witnessing the other, and yeah, especially like letting everything release until it's always about this. Yeah, I'm not feeling connected, or I'm not feeling like the level of presence that I desire, and so yeah, I think there are these pointers of for both, in a way, to trust more, because I feel in a way we're all having these issues with, are we enough, are we lovable? And yeah, I mean, it's definitely for me always like that's where the frontier needs to move, and it's, can I show more? And I think that also connects to the beginning, where it was around power. Like, are we able to be actually received in everything that we are? And I don't know if there's more that you could maybe share on, like, how in a partnership, when you get to kind of like the superficial layers are gone, like what practices do you maybe recommend to the people you work with to own more of their power around each other, so that you can lift each other up rather than pull one another down?
I think one practice, something I do in my relationship now, is like a monthly check-in of some type, where you use it almost to celebrate each other. Talk about, it's a bit, if anyone here has worked in the tech industry or most types of project management now, is kind of agile, where we have retrospectives, every couple of weeks or something like that. It's like, what went well, what went badly, what could have gone better? And really, those questions, and at its simplest, we start with those 3 questions, and then maybe add in, because inside of retrospective, there's a celebration round as well, where you talk about great work that people have done, and you do exactly the same thing in a relationship. It could be something as simple as, oh, you made me tea that morning when I wasn't feeling well, but it can be something as amazing as, God, you made dinner, or you really listened to me when I was talking about work and complaining about something, because when we do that regularly, we feel acknowledged, we feel seen. You're giving space to both people to be seen every single month. I recommend it as a monthly practice. I know some of my clients do it like almost weekly. They have a shorter one, they do it weekly. But but it also allows you to address anything that's not going well before it becomes something really big. Because most of the things that blow up that are big, there were like little small things that happened along the way that caused the big blow up. So if we are tending to these little things constantly in a way that is very manageable, to people sitting down in a space that, you know, is quiet, is connected, then it means that we're constantly sweeping up those little bits and pieces and dealing with them and talking to each other and reconnecting on a constant basis. And also we're having difficult conversations in a space that is safe. And it means that we can attune our nervous system a little bit to like, oh, difficult conversation. Okay, that was okay. And we start to learn that difficult conversations can go okay, can have great outcomes. So that's a really, you know, simple practice. I think, you know, most couples can do. I know it can be really confronting for people to go, what, you want me to, you know, keep a tally over the month of what's gone well, what's not gone well, and what could be better? Because we have this idea that if we do that in a relationship, the what's not gone well is going to be huge all the time. And the truth is, it won't. It's actually going to be relatively small. It's going to be a few things. And once you've done this a few months in a row, you literally will have one or two things there each time. And they're not going to be huge. And there'll be things that you even know about. You even be like, yes, yeah, I know that. You know, you'll sit and you listen. And a good structure for this conversation is each person shares like what's gone well. They share it. The other person just receives. So it doesn't become a dialogue in those moments. And maybe if you want to add some things to an agenda for afterwards to be discussed a bit more. I find that's a really, really good structure for us. It does wonders for us because, you know, we do so much together. Like we work together, we work in the same house. Having that time for us to reconnect is really important, and to kind of, I see it as like relationship management. What else do I see as practices? Making sure that you're having time for like connection, you know, where you don't talk about work, where you spend the time to connect with each other. Be like, how are you feeling? What's going on for you? You know, whether that is a daily basis. I know some couples that have like an hour in the evening where they turn off the TVs, the phones are away, and they just reconnect with each other. Or it's like a weekly thing, depending. And I also think it's important to have some sort of regular sexual practice that brings deep connection. That's not just having sex. That it's like, let's practice some eye gazing, some breathing together, some long hugs. You know, there's nothing like a 2-minute hug, you know, to make you feel connected to your partner. You know, stuff like that. We start to build things in like that into our relationship. And they're just like little things we can do every week or every month. And they just keep the relationship in a nice place, a nice connected place, because then it allows for deeper layers of connection. That's been my experience. I don't know if you guys think.
It's also the right kind of accountability to have for one another, because I think, you know, when I do a lot of couples work, the first delusion that you have to break is this idea of happily ever after. What, you're going to come together, you're going to put a ring on the finger, and then you're just going to be happily ever after magically like that. No, it doesn't work like that. Every single day is going to be hard work, and, you know, hard work pays off amazingly, but there also has to be a different kind of attitude that you have going into that hard work. And you know, I love the way that you sort of broke that down as well. I think tantric practice is super important. And it's not that you have to go and do tantric courses as such, but read up on something that kind of gives you that little bit of a space to practice together. Even if something as simple as breath work together, sit in a lotus position, have her on top of you, and you know, really, really feel the person in front of you. Those kind of practices really, I think, soften a tense energy. And then of course leads to wonderful sexual experiences too, but you know, that's always the cherry on the top.
Yeah. So it's just important for us to reconnect. And I think also what kind of jumps into my mind is having some space where you're able to ensure that you share your love for your partner, whether that's in words. You know, words is always a great way to share that. That's where the what's it called?
5 love languages.
Yeah, that's a really good way to know your partner's love languages, but also to have a space where it's like, where can we every month, like, what, you know, inside of the kind of check-in is like, that's why the appreciation's there. It's like, how can you ensure that the person feels the love that you are giving them, and they can consciously receiving this love in this moment? Because I think, you know, so many relationships get to a place where it's like people don't feel loved anymore, you know, and it's like, how can we ensure in our busy lives that we are consciously tending to the sending and the receiving of love within the relationship?
I think it's a great concept to sort of bring up, because I think it kind of works in twofold. Because yes, there's the intentional care and looking after your partner and bringing those things to the table, but I think it's also the responsibility of me looking after myself well enough for my partner, if that makes sense. And then it's this, well, then the relationship is really where we're coming together, when you have these full enriched people that have been looking after one another. And that's where I think, you know, I think a lot of self-neglect happens in relationships rather than being neglected by our partner.
Yeah, I agree. Where we're like, I'm in a relationship now, so my whole job is to tend to them and their needs. And if you get one partner who is just doing that, and the other partner is also is tending to their own needs, then the partner who is giving, their needs start to just completely go uncared for. And often, you know, especially I see this with men who are very nice and good men who've been told by their mummies they should be good men and give to their partners a lot. That also builds a resentment, and they don't know how to share it. They don't know how to say, this is what I need, because they've come into this kind of unwritten contract of, if I give you what you need, you're going to ask me what I need, or you're just going to give it to me automatically. And what happens with this constant giving is there's this huge resentment that builds, and it comes out somewhere, not usually anywhere obvious or seen, but it's like passive aggressiveness, little comments and things like that. So it's like, you know, making sure that we also are resourced in giving ourselves what we need, and also speaking up about what it is we need as well.
That's really powerful. It actually connects to a question that I think like Faz was asking, like how much thinking space is required before coming back to the difficult conversation?
That's a good question. I think for me, I mean, if I can answer that, it's on an individual basis in terms of how well you know your reflective mind. For me, sometimes it's just a question of being able to take myself away from the heat of that situation, even just give myself 10 minutes of breathing and then come back in again. That might be enough, rather than actually, which I think potentially can cause more harm, is if we go away too long. It's almost like now I'm abandoning this person that's trying to really connect with me and tell me these things. Whereas if I'm conscious, I'm just going to go, look, I need 5 minutes just to sort of get my breath, connect with myself, and then I can give you an answer. I think that should be more than enough.
Yeah. Like we said, there must have about if we go away too long, especially if we don't voice how long, you know, if it's like, I just need some time, that can, you know, for many partners, it just feels like, oh, I'm being abandoned and I'm sitting here and I have to just wait endlessly until you're ready. Whereas I think, like you said, if you give 5-10 minutes, or, you know, what I found in the moment for me is almost not, I don't even leave. I just stay there, and I might just say, I'm just close my eyes. I want to close my eyes, and I'm just going to ground. I'm going to feel the soles of my feet. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to, you know, acknowledge there's a lot of emotion there, and then just try and come to a place of stillness. And that might take 5 minutes of me just being there, and knowing that you have that space, and you have the space to do that in silence, and someone not poking you and pushing you. It's amazing how quickly you can bring calmness, that you would come to an answer if you need to respond, if you want to, when you want to respond.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, I think there's also a component of like vulnerability of in that moment, and sharing, okay, this is what I need. And I mean, potentially also just giving the next best answer, you know, the answer that you come to in that moment, which then in the consecutive dialogues may continue to evolve. Because I mean, that's what I begin to see like more and more, man. Relationships are these vehicles for healing. When we're really coming to it with this intention of like, okay, like what am I here to learn? What, like if the connectivity isn't sort of in question, like how can I show up to serve?
Yeah.
so that it deepens and deepens and deepens and deepens. And yeah, like, what do I need to feel? You know, like, what are the things that this person is here to show me?
Gentlemen, we are coming to a close. David, thank you so much for sharing the space with us today. Dude, it's always amazing chatting to you. I think, like I said in the beginning, we can go on for hours and hours and hours.
It's always a pleasure. Always a pleasure, Massimo. I was really delighted when I saw the invite. Like I said, it's always beautiful talking to you. And Toby, it's been beautiful to hear your insights and your own experience of navigating relationships. And big thank you to both of you for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming in, sir.
Just before we finish, David, where can anyone find you if you have your most ideal place?
Yeah. Probably the best place to get me is on Instagram. You can find me at @theauthenticman_. You know, I'm pretty active on Instagram. Probably the best place to DM me with questions or anything like that.
Awesome.
Amazing. Happy week, everyone. David, again, thank you so much. As I said earlier, I love the hairdo. And yeah, it's super grateful for being introduced and having shared it all with you, brother.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Lots of love, gentlemen.
Cool, man.
Lots of love.
Be well.
See you all soon. Bye-bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.